Alright folks, how's it going? Cams Campbell here, your host, and we're taking a look at the next chapter of Dr. Zhivago. It's warm in Scotland, by the way. It's like my wee thermometer there says 26 degrees in the house. It doesn't feel like 26, but it's warm. So I've taken the liberty of putting my top on because, you know, I'm kind that way. Nobody needs to see what's in below this. And you'll probably hear a cat meowing because we got a new Siamese. Not a new one, a new to us Siamese. We rehomed a 3-year-old boy and he's very noisy. So you'll probably hear him. He's out in the hallway making a rumpus. So chapter 14, this is a long one. We're at 40 pages this week. And I had a day off this week because I had a migraine which crept into Wednesday, and I was like, all day Tuesday I was wiped out. Wednesday was rough as well, but I managed to get it done. I don't know how. All day I spent yesterday sitting outside with my Keychron keyboard in the sunshine, reading Zhivago, making notes, writing my first draft. And here's what I've written. If you want to read it, of course, you can do that over at camscampbellreads.substack.com. That's where all my essays go out. And, of course, it's on YouTube, which you might already know. And as an audio podcast, which also you might already know, because you've got choices of ways to consume my weekly essays. So, yeah, chapter 14 means we've got 2 left after this. We've got conclusion and epilogue. So we're getting to the end, and it's getting really interesting now. At least I think so. So what did I write this week? Let's get into it. It's winter. Lara tells Yury that Komarovsky has arrived in Uryatin and he wants to have a word with Yury. He's planning a trip to the far east of Russia and is offering to take Yury, Lara and Pasha with him because they are all in grave danger. Yury agrees to stay in that night for Komarovsky's visit. I'm glad to read that they got themselves a big fluffy cat to help with the rat problem. Komarovsky arrives and tells Yury about how Yury's father had died in his arms. Yury is understandably very brusque with Komarovsky. Komarovsky informs them in no uncertain terms of the danger they face, particularly because Yury openly defies the communist regime. Yury's name is apparently on a list. Komarovsky has seen it. Those with sympathies for the now overthrown provisional government and rural Zemstvos are gathering in the Far East, which is why Komarovsky is heading out there himself. They're going to set up a Far Eastern Republic with a coalition government. This Far Eastern Republic, in Russian Dalnyevostochная Respublika, existed from April 1920 to November 1922. Lenin sanctioned it as a kind of buffer state between Soviet Siberia and Japanese-occupied Pacific coast. After Japan's withdrawal from Vladivostok in October 1922, the Far Eastern Republic had served its purpose and was absorbed into Soviet Russia. Komarovsky outstays his welcome and rants about the Far East and Mongolia as the new America. Lara finally has enough and asks him to leave. Yury and Lara decide to escape to Varykino. Pasternak treats us to a poetic love scene as the two plan to ensconce themselves in the freezing old house at Varykino for one last time together. They leave for Varykino early in the morning. They gallop out of Uryatin on a sleigh borrowed from Sam Devyatov. They pass Sam Devyatov himself and Komarovsky too as they fly to their refuge. Glasha Tuntseva shouts farewell as they pass. So too does Sima Tuntseva further on. They arrive at Varykino at dusk. The Zhivago's house is intact, though in rough condition inside. Yury decides that they should check out the Mykolitsyn's house. They break into the Mykolitsyn's house and discover that someone has been living there until very recently, if indeed they are not still there. Yury waters the horse and the family all snuggle down in their warm coats and fall into a deep, sound, enjoyable sleep, like children who had been running and playing all day in the open air. Yury wakes up with an urge to write. He He decides to put it off till the evening so he can help to get at least 2 rooms into a habitable state. Little Katya is bored and cranky until Yury finds some old toys of Liberius. Katya complains that the toys are for babies and she is not a baby. However, she finds a game that involves using the toys to build a house for her doll, and Lara comments on the innocence of children. Quote, "Children are more honest. They aren't frightened of the truth, but we are so afraid of seeming to be behind the times that we are ready to betray what is most dear to us and praise what repels us and say yes to what we don't understand." Lara cooks a big meal, after which she talks about how they are just pretending at living. Yury reminds Lara that Komarovsky's offer still stands. They could go back to Yuriatin tomorrow and avail themselves of it. Lara explains that their love is heaven sent, but that there are destructive forces in the world that they must distrust. She says that Yury was given wings to fly above the clouds, while she, a woman, has to stay close to the earth to shelter her young. Yury replies that this pretending to live was not their fault. It was thrust upon them by the country's political upheaval. Yury wonders whether they can reach some arrangement with Samdevyatov. Yury will write a book for 6 months, a medical textbook or a collection of poems, while Samdevyatov supplies them through the winter. He mentions that he could make a living as a translator, which is interesting as that's exactly what Pasternak did. In fact, Pasternak saw translation as a necessary means to an end, one which kept him from his work of passion, his novel Dr. Zhivago, which he knew could never be published in Russia under the current regime. Lara agrees and asks that Yury set down the poems he has recited to her before they are lost in the mists of time. They all have a bath and get into freshly washed bedclothes. It sounds idyllic. Yury is beside himself with happiness as the moon lights the paper on the desk and he settles in to write. You can imagine Pasternak's enjoyment here as he describes this scene from one poet to another. I don't know if it's just the aspiring writer in me, but I find this whole chapter idyllic, as if it were one of those writing retreats one can pay through the nose for. And with Lara's describing their love as sent from heaven, the Creator is alive in their household, and all Yury need do is be open to that. Pasternak describes the process through Yury. Quote, "At such moments, Yury felt that the main part of his work was not being done by him, but by something which was above him and controlling him. The thought and poetry of the world as it was at that moment, and as it would be in the future." Yury is simply the conduit for these mysterious forces, as indeed is Pasternak. A sound from outside breaks Yury's reverie. He goes to investigate and discovers there are wolves nearby. He's worried for the horse in the barn. Yury and Lara enjoy their day together while Katya plays outside with a toboggan. Yury is looking forward to night time when he can sit down and write his poetry. His weariness seems to cast the whole day in a fog as a preparation for the poetry already forming in his head. He feels that their time together is limited, which undoubtedly it is, and he longs to express his anguish in poetry. Last night's wolves have now become symbols in his mind, symbols of the destructive force that's coming for them. It grows in his mind into a dragon. When Yury sits down to write and goes over the previous night's scribbles, he's disappointed that what brought him to tears the night before now reads as mundane. As he revises his work, Yury loses himself in the process, and Pasternak explains this with some technical poetic jargon. Yury and Pasternak know not only the art of poetry, but also the craft. Lara awakens and approaches Yury to say that she'd heard howling outside. The wolves are closing in. They've been at Varykino for 13 days. Lara has started packing so they can leave. Yury harnesses the horse, but then Lara has a panic and they decide to stay another night. She insists they leave at first light, so they stay one final night. Since the horse is already harnessed, Yury heads out to collect firewood from his old house. There's a melancholy scene here as Yury feels lonely. He sees the new moon as a symbol of separation and solitude. As he's heading back to the Mikulitsyn's house, his horse whinnies at the sound of another horse. He returns to the house to find Komarovsky in conversation with Lara. Komarovsky explains that he'd placed rumours of his departure around town, but had stayed on only to give Lara and Yury another chance to avail themselves of his offer. Lara is keen to go with Komarovsky. He is leaving the following day by train for Vladivostok, and time is of the essence. Komarovsky asks Yury to go into the kitchen with him for a private talk. Komarovsky begins by telling Yury that Strelnikov has been captured and shot. This means that Lara is in imminent danger and must leave immediately. Komarovsky tells Yury that he'll have to convince Lara to go and that he'll follow on later. Otherwise, she won't agree to leave. Yury agrees to this, knowing that he and Lara are fated to be separated soon anyway. And so the prophecy that Yury foresaw in the previous chapter comes to pass. Komarovsky, the man, quote, of whom I shall always be incurably, insanely jealous, is the one who takes Lara from him. Not only does it happen, but Yury consents to it. Lara has gone, and we're with Yury as he suffers from the mental anguish of his decision. Quote, goodbye, Lara, until we meet in the next world. Goodbye, my love, my inexhaustible, everlasting joy. Pasternak uses a lot of colours in this paragraph. Blue snowdrifts, juicy pineapple light, bronze-red patches of sunset, lilac dusk turning to a deep mauve, pink sky. This explosion of colour perhaps reflects Yury's heightened emotional state. It signals the transition, and Yury has what Pasternak calls a double monologue. In one, he's being practical, light the fire, complete the poems, go to Moscow. And in the other, he's lamenting his lost love and planning to immortalise it in writing. He weeps for his loss and drowns his sorrow in vodka that Komarovsky left behind. As I mentioned last time, this departure is drawn straight from Pasternak's loss of Olga Ivinskaya, about which Yury's poem Parting is written. Yury feels like he's going out of his mind. The real Lara is changing in his poetry into someone else. He's holding back from a full freedom of expression, lest he give away too much of himself. It's a means of protecting Lara. I imagine Pasternak would have had such thoughts himself, reducing real people in his life into metaphor and references rather than direct attribution. As he writes, Yury reflects on his view of history. It comes in the form of images taken from the vegetable kingdom. This seems like a weird translation choice to me, as it conjures up images of carrots and cabbages in my mind. Pevere and Volokhonsky have it as vegetables too. The original reads жизнь растительного царства and is closer to the plant kingdom or even the world of flora. It's certainly not vegetables. This description of history is central to the novel. Again and again, the characters are living through big moments, revolutions, wars. But one sees this historical significance only with hindsight. While we live through events, we still have to take care of ourselves, gathering wood, eating and sleeping, having conversations. And back then, there wouldn't have been media outlets to keep us tuned in to the news cycle. Anyway, Pasternak concludes this train of thought with this bombshell. Quote, but revolutions are made by fanatical men of action with one-track minds, men who are narrow-minded to the point of genius. They overturn the old order in a few hours or days. The whole upheaval takes a few weeks or at most years. But for decades thereafter, for centuries, the spirit of narrowness which led to the upheaval is worshipped as holy. Brave words. Sam Devyatov stops by and takes the horse away. Yury has not been looking after it. Yury misses Lara and hears her voice calling in his head. He sleeps and dreams of a dragon underneath the house. Sam Devyatov promises to come by in a week and take Yury away to safety. Yury hears footsteps approaching the house. It's Strelnikov. So much for Komarovsky's claim that Strelnikov had been captured and shot. Had he really heard that, or was he just making it up? The two men talk for hours. Pasha explains that he'd come to see Lara and Katya, but he'd received the news of their whereabouts too late. Pasha has been in hiding since he'd learned that he was to be court-martialed on a trumped-up charge. He explains that he'd met a young boy who had escaped the firing squad of the partisans. It is, of course, Terenti Galuzin. It was Galuzin who had betrayed Strelnikov to the Cheka, so he'd gone on the run across Siberia all the way back to Varykino. He knows that they are closing in. Pasha tells Yury that he must leave. Pasha's going to stay for only one night. It's not safe. He rants about the revolution and his life's work, making out that it was all for Lara's sake. His love for her had driven him to clear the way for a new way of life, all the while loving her from afar. Yury stops him to ask whether Pasha had ever considered the love that Lara bore for him. Quote, "I asked you, had you any idea how much she loved you? More than anyone in the world." From his response, it seems that Pasha had not considered that. The two men discussed the circumstances under which Lara had declared her love for Pasha. Yury sleeps well that night. He dreams of his childhood. When he awakes, he goes to find Pasha. He's not in the house. Yury goes out for water, and there is Pasha's dead body. He shot himself. His blood has frozen into droplets that resemble rowan berries. Rowan berries, huh? So, yeah, there's a lot in this, and it was a 40-pager, as I've said, and I was coming off a migraine, as I've also said, but somehow I still found it tremendously engaging to have that scene with Yury and Pasha / Strelnikov after everything that's come to pass. You know, when you remember back when Pasha first met Strelnikov in the railway carriage, and they had that scene, that dialogue, and how things have changed. You know, I mean, the Civil War was still happening at that time. Now it's over. Pasha was on the rise within the ranks of the Civil War, and I get the feeling that he had an inferiority complex when he left. It felt as if he didn't himself believe that he deserved Lara's love, and he had to go and prove himself in some way. So he goes out and he has this glittering career as a partisan, as one of the Reds, ridding the world of the Whites and all of that. But in the end, I don't know, love is love, isn't it? Lara explains how she loves Pasha, how she loved and still loves him. Pasha loves her. Yury loves Lara. Lara loves Yury. Yury loves Tonya. Tonya loves Yury. It's all quite complicated, isn't it? And where the love of Yury and Tonya and of Pasha and Lara, it feels real. The way Pasternak portrays it, it does feel real, which I guess means that Pasternak himself loved his wife Zinaida while he was in this affair with Olga Ivinskaya, which, according to Anna Pasternak's book Lara, is exactly the case. Pasternak was in this strange situation where the passion of his life was with Olga, but he still loved his wife, and his wife loved him. And his wife did not love Olga, and, you know, she wouldn't even let her in the house, which of course you can understand, you know. So it was complicated, and I think that's what's coming through in Zhivago. But when you think of Zhivago as a story, even have you never read it or seen it, you still know, or at least I did, you know, it's about the love of Yury Zhivago and Lara. You know, Lara's theme is the music from the film, the famous tune, and I knew that. I know the music and knew the name of it. So what's Pasternak saying with this novel? Is it that this is an everlasting love for the ages, where the love for his wife is not? I guess. I mean, it's hard to explain. You know, I did mention in a recent episode that it made me think of The Bridges of Madison County. Now, it's a long time since I read that. In fact, it's probably 30 years or more. And the film, I remember watching the film with Clint Eastwood and Meryl Streep, two titans of the acting world, in my opinion. And to see them together playing those roles, it gets you, Ken, really does. And that was a forbidden love that was short-lived and intense. And at the end, they both go back to their vows, I suppose. But they still broke their vows. So there's that. I don't know, this is a poetic love, a love of the ages, a romantic love, the kind of love that makes you do crazy things, I suppose. I don't know. I'm just rambling now about love, but that's what this book is about, isn't it? And to go back to what I read out, where we had a quote, this one was really interesting, where it says, revolutions are made by fanatical men of action with one-track minds, men who are narrow-minded to the point of genius. Was Lenin a genius? I think, having read a couple of biographies of his, perhaps he saw opportunity. He waited till the moment was right. Somehow he never got sent to the firing squad, so he's a survivor. And then it goes on to say the whole upheaval takes a few weeks or at most years. So the upheaval, well, I suppose if you count the Civil War, 4 or 5 years. But then you had the war, communism, and then you had the political fallout of that with Stalin and Stalin and Trotsky and Lenin and the famine. Difficult time. So yeah, the upheaval continued actually for a long time, but it goes on for decades thereafter. Then it says for centuries, so it didn't go on for centuries, it went on for 7 decades. And then it says the spirit of narrowness which led to the upheaval is worshipped as holy. Yeah, it kind of is worshipped as holy. There's a book I'm going to recommend to you that I absolutely loved by Svetlana Alexievich called Secondhand Time. And it's a reportage style book where the author interviews people of all different ages and backgrounds, people who lived through communism, people who were born after communism, the whole range. And it's fascinating, particularly to hear about the older people who yearn for the stability of the Soviet times. You know, people even who endured Stalin. And, you know, there's a lot of them still around. They're still there, still voting and taking part in so-called democracy, I suppose you might say. And then the young people who, you know, they just want what we have in the West. They see what we have and they feel that it's their right and privilege and they deserve it. So that's a fascinating book. I definitely recommend that one. And so, yeah, I think, as I said in my comment there, brave words. It certainly was, you know, for Pasternak to claim that the spirit of narrowness which led to the upheaval is worshipped as holy. It's just, yeah, I love that phrase. So well done, Pasternak. Well done for surviving, you know. Anyway, that's where we are. So Pasha is now dead. Lara's going off with Komarovsky. Is she going to go all the way to the Far East? And what's Yury going to do? Is he going to follow her? Is he going to try and find Tonya? We don't have long left to find out. We've got a conclusion and an epilogue, and then we'll know. So tune in for the next one. Thanks for watching. Catch you for the conclusion. Cheers.